The fundamental economic problem of scarcity means that we need to make decisions about how to allocate resources. Those three decisions were what to produce, how to produce, and how to share out production. Economic theory states that markets can be used to help us make these decisions. Markets have buyers or consumers, and markets have sellers or producers. The buyer side of the market is modeled using demand curves, and the seller side of the market is modeled using supply curves. Buyers and sellers interact in a market in order to determine the price of a good or service. In this lesson, we will learn about how prices are set and the roles that prices play in helping society decide how to allocate its scarce resources. Let's imagine that we all set up a firm or a business in order to produce t-shirts. We don't yet know how many t-shirts to produce or how to share them out amongst our consumers. All we know at this stage is the amount of t-shirts that we are willing and able to produce at the different price levels. We can show this using a supply curve. When drawing a supply curve, remember the law of supply. As the price of a good or service increases, producers will be more willing and able to produce more of the good or service as they will receive higher profits. In this example, at a price of £10, we will be willing and able to supply 20 t-shirts to the market. But if the price of our t-shirts increases to £20, for example, well then we'll be willing and able to supply the market with a higher number of t-shirts as we'll make more profits. Let's say that we expect to receive £20 for our t-shirts. According to our supply curve, at this price we will be willing and able to produce 40 units. When we go to the market, there will be buyers or consumers. Remember, the consumer side of the market is modeled using a demand curve. Now that buyers are able to interact with sellers, we can see what quantity of t-shirts consumers will be willing and able to consume at different prices. In this example, if we go across to the demand curve at a price of £20, we will see that the quantity of the t-shirt that is demanded is 20 units. However, at this price, we as producers are willing and able to produce 40 t-shirts. Therefore, at a price of £20, supply is more than demand. Economists call this situation excess supply. We can see from the diagram that at a price of £20, we will produce or supply 40 t-shirts. However, demand will only be at 20 units. Therefore, at this price, we will overproduce by 20 t-shirts. In order to get rid of or ration off these extra 20 t-shirts, producers will need to lower their prices. Let's say that the producer lowers his price to £5. In this model, let's see what will happen. At the price of £5, if we go across to the supply curve, we can see that supply will contract to 20 units. However, at the lower price, demand will extend to 40 units. This results in a situation where demand is now higher than supply. Therefore, at our market stall, there will be customers who have the money to buy our t-shirts. However, we have not produced enough t-shirts to meet the demand. A situation where demand is higher than supply is known as excess demand. This often happens where prices for a good or service are too low. Therefore, in order to ration off or share out the good or service more efficiently, producers will now need to increase their prices. The market will clear where an equilibrium price is reached. The equilibrium price is the price at which supply and demand are equal. In other words, there is no overproduction or excess supply, and there is no underproduction or excess demand. Once the market clears or the equilibrium price is reached, there will be no reason for producers to change their price. Once the price of a good or service is determined by a market, prices will then play an important role in deciding how to allocate scarce resources. Prices perform three functions in helping us decide how to use scarce resources. The first function that price performs is rationing. Prices act as a way to share out goods and services, as only those who are willing and able to pay the market price for the good or service are able to consume it. For example, most people will be willing to consume a luxury holiday. Unfortunately, only those who are able to pay the market price can have them, and that's how luxury holidays, or anything really, is shared out. The second function of price is signaling. Changes in prices can provide important information to society about how conditions of supply or demand may be changing for that good or service. For example, the price of petrol may be increasing, and this is a signal to society that either the supply of petrol is decreasing, the demand may be increasing, or both. The third function of price is to provide producers with incentives in order to guide resources to be used where they are most needed. For example, the price of biology tuition may increase, maybe because society needs or demands more doctors. This provides an incentive for producers of education to produce more biology tuition. Therefore, prices can help society to decide what to produce. These three functions of price are essential to enable society to allocate resources efficiently. Without prices, how would we know what to produce and how to share it out? I don't know, maybe we'd fight or something. The price of a good or service changes when there are changes in the conditions of supply, demand, or both. It may be worth revising what is meant by conditions of supply and conditions of demand by watching my previous videos on demand and supply. Remember, changes in the conditions of supply and demand cause the respective curves to shift. However, changes in the price of a good or service cause movements along the demand and supply curves. Let's analyze how prices change now by looking at 4 examples covering increases and decreases in supply and demand. In this example, demand for the good or service has increased due to a change in the condition of demand. Here, incomes have gone up. This leads to a rightward shift in the demand curve from D to D1. As a result of this rightward shift in demand, there will be excess demand at the original price of P1. The excess demand is equal to Q2 minus Q1. As a result of excess demand, producers will increase their prices to P2 in order to ration off the excess demand. At a higher price, supply will extend and demand will contract to a level where supply and demand are equal again and equilibrium is restored. Now that supply and demand are equal again, there is no reason for the price of this good or service to change. In this example, the demand for the good has decreased due to a change in a condition of demand. In this example, let's assume it's because incomes are now lower. This will lead to a leftward shift in the demand curve from D to D1. As a result, there will be excess supply at the original equilibrium price of P1, equal to Q1 minus Q2. As a result of excess supply, producers will now decrease their prices to P2 in order to ration off this excess supply and reach a new equilibrium. At the price P2, supply will contract and demand will extend to a lower quantity where supply and demand are now equal again and equilibrium is restored. In this example, supply for the good has increased due to a change in a condition of supply. Here, let's assume that wages are lower. This leads to an increase in supply, or a rightward shift of the supply curve from S to S1, as the costs of producing this good or service for firms has fallen due to lower wages. This rightward shift in supply leads to excess supply at the original equilibrium price. The excess supply in this example would be equal to Q2 minus Q1. As a result of excess supply, producers will be forced to decrease their price in order to ration off their extra production. At the lower price, demand will now extend, supply will contract to a higher quantity where supply and demand are equal again and equilibrium is restored. In this example, the supply of the good or service has decreased due to a change in a condition of supply. In this example, let's assume that rents are now higher, increasing costs of production for firms. This leads to a decrease in supply or a leftward shift in the supply curve from S to S1. The leftward shift in supply will lead to excess demand at the original equilibrium price of P1. Excess demand will be equal to Q1 minus Q2. As a result of this excess demand, producers will now increase their prices in order to ration off the excess demand for this good or service. At the higher price of P2, demand will contract and supply will now extend to a lower quantity where supply and demand are equal and equilibrium is restored. Remember, once equilibrium is restored, there is no reason for the price of this good or service to change again. It is very important that you can explain how prices change using all 4 steps in the analysis we've done and draw the diagrams accurately. It is likely that you will have to write out these steps and draw the diagrams in a 10 or a 25 mark question, so you must learn them all. Practice writing down the steps and drawing the diagrams that go with each analysis, as I promise you, this will come in handy when you answer essay questions in your exam.